Hey guys, it's Libby, and first things first, I have rearranged my room a little bit so the shelves are now next to each other as opposed to in a corner, and we have the air conditioning unit right here, which hopefully I will not bump and turn on, and hopefully there will be less glare on my glasses. I know that there's still a little bit, but I promise I'm not an android that is trying to hypnotize you and simultaneously conceal my robot eyes. But today I wanted to talk about a thing that a lot of readers feel, which is, oh god, there are so many good books out there, I will never be able to read them all. This feeling had got me down a bit lately, so I decided to do some math, and as it turns out, I think I can actually read all of the books that I want to read. So what I decided to do first was figure out how many books are published each decade that I want to read. So how much new stuff are we throwing onto Libby's TBR? So I went to my Goodreads bookshelf and I looked at all of the books, so everything I've read and everything on my TBR, and I counted how many books were on that list that were published between 2008 and 2017. So that's a full decade, and I got 324 books, which is a little bit more than I thought it was going to be. And then let's just call it 350, because there's probably some other books that were published in that decade that I'm not aware of yet, but that I do in fact want to read. So each decade is producing 350 new books that I want to read. I read a little bit less than 100 books a year, so every decade I should dedicate 4 years to reading new things that have been published in that decade. Or to break it down a little bit more largely by year, every year I should read 40% things that have been published in the last 10 years in order to keep up with new releases. Now, I think that I am a little bit pickier than most people when it comes to new releases, so unfortunately this number may be a little higher for you. But I was comforted by the fact that I am absolutely able to keep pace with publishing. I thought it was possible that every decade more books than I can read in a decade would be published, or that I'd have to dedicate like 95% of my time to reading new releases in order to keep up, but I actually don't. It's only 40% of my time. So that means that 60% of the books that I read can be either rereads or things that were published more than 10 years ago. And I think for right now, I'd like to split that roughly evenly between rereads and classics, so 30% of the things I'm reading each year are rereads, 30% of the things I'm reading are classics that I've never read before. But as I get older and have read more of the global backlist, I think the new classics will go down and the rereads will go up. So then I wanted to see how this breakdown of 40% recent releases, 30% classics, and 30% rereads broke down in comparison to what I read last year. So in 2017, I read 82 books, 43 of which were new and published within the last 10 years. 24 of them were classics that I had never read before, and 19 were rereads, which breaks down to 52% new, 29% classics, and 23% rereads. So I actually way overshot I 12% overshot how many new releases I need to read in order to keep pace. I was also pretty surprised at how small the reread percentage was. It's less than a quarter, and yet I still always felt a little bit guilty when I was rereading something, because I felt like I could have been reading something new and catching up, and if I had I've read Rebecca like 20 times at least. If every time I read Rebecca, instead I had read another book by Daphne du Maurier, I would be done with the complete catalog of Daphne du Maurier novels. But apparently, I'm totally fine, and I could even be rereading more. And now, looking at classics, the global backlist, as it were, it's easy to get overwhelmed by how many books there are and how many you want to read, and also kind of how long they are. And last year I read 24 new-to-me classics, not even counting the rereads, which is where like half the fun is at least. Let's make the math easier and call it 25. I'm currently 26 years old, which means I've got like at least another 50 years to live. If it's any less than that, I will be severely disappointed. And 25 times 50 is 1,250, which I think is more than the total number of classics that I want to read. It's definitely way less than the total number of books that have ever been published, but a lot of those I don't want to read. So that means in about 4 years I could read all of Anthony Trollope, and I don't even think I want to read everything he wrote. In 2 years I can read everything that was published in the Middle Ages that is of any interest to me. In another 2 years I can get through everything I haven't read yet by Daphne du Maurier, Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, and the Brontes. And in 5 years tops I can get through everything from the early modern period that interests me. And that's only 13 years. So even if I only live another 50 years, I've still got 37 years to read everything that I want to from the 20th century, some weird stuff from the Renaissance, and other 19th century authors, which means I might even decide to read Vanity Fair. So I came out of this exercise feeling pretty hopeful about my lifetime reading prospects. I hope I've sparked a little glimmer of hope for you guys too, unless, like, the publishing industry is way more attuned to your tastes than mine, and they're putting out way more things that you like than that I like, in which case, Godspeed. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you later.